My name is Naomi Carter, and I was 32 years old the morning my fiancé disappeared, on the day we were supposed to get married. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I had become another man's wife. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I had secretly loved someone else, but because standing alone inside the courthouse finally forced me to admit something I should have understood years earlier. If someone truly wants to build a life with you, they don't make you wait while they build excuses instead. The wedding wasn't extravagant. It wasn't even a wedding in the traditional sense, just a civil ceremony at the King County Courthouse in Seattle. Afterward, we planned dinner with both families at a small waterfront restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. No ballroom, no orchestra, no 5-tier cake, just us, exactly how I'd wanted it. My fiancé, Ryan Foster, insisted simple was romantic. We'll throw a bigger celebration on our first anniversary. He'd kissed my forehead when he said it. I believed him. I always believed him. We completed our marriage application online the week before. The appointment was scheduled for 10 a.m. I arrived 20 minutes early wearing the ivory dress Ryan had helped me choose. It wasn't expensive, but every time I looked at it, I remembered him smiling inside the boutique. That's the one. You look like home. At 10:05, the clerk called our names. Only mine answered. Maybe traffic, I said. She smiled kindly. It happens. By 10:45, I'd called Ryan 19 times. Straight to voicemail. Every time. At 11, I contacted his office. The receptionist sounded confused. He never came in today. His executive assistant answered next. I'm sorry. I assumed he was already with you. By noon, rain streaked the courthouse windows. Seattle looked gray enough to disappear completely. I kept checking the entrance. Every time the doors opened, my heart jumped. Every time, someone else walked inside. At 12:17, my phone vibrated. Not from Ryan, from social media. Someone had tagged his marketing director, Lena Brooks. Curious. I opened the story, then stopped breathing. Ryan sat inside a cozy suburban kitchen. He wore the same charcoal suit he'd promised to marry me in. Beside him, Lena laughed while an elderly woman pinched Ryan's cheek affectionately. A homemade pie rested on the table. Flowers filled the room. Ryan held the older woman's hand. The caption read, Grandma finally believes I found someone worthy. Thank you for pretending to be my boyfriend today. I don't know what we'd do without you. I read it once, then again, then again. Nothing changed. That morning, at 8:11, Ryan had texted me, leaving now. Don't get nervous. Next time I see you, you'll be my wife. Apparently, the next person he planned to see was another woman's grandmother. The courthouse clerk approached carefully. Ms. Carter, if your fiancé doesn't arrive within the hour, we'll need to cancel today's reservation. I nodded. I understand. She hesitated. I'm sorry. Her voice held genuine kindness. Somehow, that hurt the most. 7 years earlier, Ryan found me crying alone outside the university engineering building after a professor publicly humiliated my senior project. Everyone else walked around me. Ryan sat beside me without saying anything for almost 10 minutes. Finally, he handed me a bottle of water, then smiled. One bad day doesn't get to decide your whole life. That sentence changed mine. When Ryan launched his logistics software startup, I became employee number 3, not because he asked, because I wanted to help. I built financial projections, prepared investor presentations, worked weekends, skipped vacations. When payroll ran short, I delayed my own salary. Whenever someone praised Ryan's leadership, I smiled, never mentioning that many of those presentations still contained my handwriting. It never bothered me. Back then, his dream felt like ours. I truly believed. Waiting together meant building together. At 1:05, the courthouse officially canceled our appointment. The bouquet I'd carried all morning suddenly felt ridiculous. I left it on a bench outside. Rain slowly soaked the white roses. I slipped my engagement ring into its velvet box, closed the lid, and whispered something I never imagined I'd say. I'm done waiting. Naomi? I recognized the voice immediately. Deep, calm, almost impossible to surprise. I turned. Julian Mercer stood beneath the courthouse awning holding 2 paper coffee cups. Rain dotted the shoulders of his navy coat. He'd obviously just arrived from the airport. Our families had known each other for decades. His mother and mine volunteered together for a literacy foundation. When I was 15, Julian was already 20. Confident, quiet, The sort of person adults trusted instinctively. Most teenagers ignored me. Julian never did. When people spoke over me, he always waited until they finished. Then asked, "What were you trying to say?" It was the first time anyone had ever asked. After college, he moved to Boston, eventually became CEO of Mercer Capital. We rarely saw one another. Birthdays, holiday dinners, occasional charity events, nothing more. He looked from my face to the empty chair beside me, then quietly noticed the still open social media post glowing in my hand. He never came. I shook my head. He became someone else's boyfriend instead. Julian remained silent. No dramatic outrage, no insults, no promises. He simply handed me one of the coffees. "Drink this. We'll figure out what comes next." His restraint nearly broke me. Everyone else always rushed to fix pain. Julian simply made room for it. As we sat together, I remembered something he'd said months earlier during Thanksgiving dinner. His grandfather had spent the entire evening introducing him to daughters of wealthy family friends. Finally, Julian smiled politely and replied, "If everyone insists on arranging my future, I may eventually marry someone I already trust." It sounds considerably less exhausting. Everyone laughed. At the time, so had I. Now, without fully understanding why, I heard myself ask, "Julian, do you still need a wife?" He looked at me for a very long time. The courthouse faded into background noise. People entered. People left. Neither of us moved. Finally, he spoke carefully. "Naomi, you're hurt. I'm not making a life-changing decision for someone who's bleeding emotionally." "I know." I held his eyes steadily. "I'm not trying to punish Ryan. I'm trying to stop punishing myself." Another long silence. Then Julian asked, "If tomorrow Ryan apologizes, will you regret asking me this?" "No. If 6 months from now, you realize you never loved me, I won't lie to you. If we marry, it will begin honestly. I can promise that." He nodded slowly. "One more question. Are you absolutely certain?" I looked down at the engagement ring inside its box, then gently closed my handbag. "I'm certain." Julian didn't lead me toward the marriage office. Not immediately. Instead, he called an independent family attorney, asked her to speak with me alone. She explained every legal consequence: community property, divorce law, financial obligations. She asked 3 separate times whether anyone had pressured me. 3 separate times. I answered, "No." Only after that, Julian returned, offered me his arm, not his hand, giving me room to refuse one final time. I accepted. At 3:12 that afternoon, we signed a new marriage application. By 4:01, a judge pronounced us husband and wife inside a nearly empty courtroom. There were no flowers, no music, no promises whispered dramatically across the room. Just 2 signatures, 2 witnesses, and one quiet sentence Julian spoke as we walked outside. "No matter what happens later, you'll never again be someone's backup plan." For the first time that day, I believed him. Julian drove me home first. Not to his house. Not to a hotel. To my apartment. "You should pack because you choose to," he said. "Not because today feels impossible." I unlocked my front door. Everything looked exactly the same. The wedding invitation still sat on the kitchen counter. My shoes from the rehearsal dinner waited beside the hallway bench. 2 coffee mugs remained in the sink. One mine, one Ryan's. He'd stayed over the previous night. He'd kissed me before leaving at 6 in the morning. "I'll see you at the courthouse." Funny, some lies don't sound like lies when they're spoken. I packed slowly, not because I wanted to leave, because I needed to keep moving. A few dresses, work files, my passport, the framed photograph from college where Ryan and I stood covered in graduation confetti. I picked it up, looked at it, then placed it face down inside a drawer. Some memories don't belong in boxes. They belong where you no longer have to see them. Julian waited downstairs the entire time. He never texted, never asked how long I'd be. When I finally reached the lobby nearly an hour later, he stepped out of the car only to take my suitcase. "Ready?" "No." He nodded. "Good." "I'd be worried if you were." Instead of taking me to his home, he drove toward Mercer House. His family's estate overlooked Lake Washington. Elegant, old, beautiful without trying to impress anyone. "I'm not asking you to move in tonight," Julian said quietly. "My guest house is empty. You'll have your own space. If tomorrow morning you decide this marriage was a mistake, I'll drive you wherever you want. I looked at him. You planned all that? I planned nothing. I simply believe people think more clearly when they know they're free to leave. That sentence stayed with me. Free to leave. Ryan had always talked about forever. Julian talked about freedom. By evening, both families already knew. My mother cried before I even reached the front door. Not because I'd married Julian. Because she'd learned how long I'd waited alone. She wrapped both arms around me. Why didn't you call us? I didn't want to ruin today. Her hands tightened. Oh, sweetheart. The only person who ruined today wasn't you. My father stood silently nearby. He'd never been a man of many words. After a long pause, he asked only one question. How many hours? I frowned. What? How long did he leave you sitting there? Almost 5. He closed his eyes. His jaw tightened. Then he walked outside without another word. Years later, my mother admitted he'd spent 20 minutes, sitting alone on the back porch because he was afraid if he stayed inside, he would drive straight to Ryan's house. Dinner passed quietly. No one questioned my marriage. No one demanded explanations. Only after dessert, Julian's grandfather finally cleared his throat. This marriage, he looked directly at Julian. It begins honestly. Don't ever use her disappointment as the foundation for your happiness. Julian answered immediately. I won't. Then the older man turned toward me. And if my grandson ever stops deserving you, you come tell me first. I almost smiled. That night, Julian walked me to the guest house. Not inside, only to the porch. He handed me a small envelope. Our attorneys prepared this. Inside rested a postnuptial agreement. Simple, clear. Everything we'd owned before marriage remained separate. Neither family business could pressure the other. Either of us could request separation at any time. No penalties, no financial traps, no emotional bargaining disguised as legal language. At the bottom, one handwritten sentence appeared. You never have to stay because leaving feels difficult. I looked up. You wrote this? Julian nodded. I wanted one thing that wasn't written by lawyers. For the first time that day, my eyes filled with tears. Not because someone had promised forever, because someone had acknowledged I might someday choose otherwise, and still respected me. He left, without trying to hug me, without asking whether I needed anything. Only, good night, Naomi. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep. The house felt unfamiliar. Quiet, safe, which somehow made sleeping harder. I walked outside. Lights still glowed inside the main house. Julian sat alone in the library reading financial reports. He noticed me immediately. Can't sleep? No. He closed the folder. Tea? Please. Neither of us mentioned Ryan. Instead, we spoke about ordinary things. Books, travel, the Seattle rain, for almost 40 minutes. Finally, I asked the question sitting heavily inside my chest. Why were you at the courthouse? He didn't answer immediately. My mother called. She couldn't reach Ryan. She worried you'd be standing there alone. So she asked you to check on me. Yes. I stared into my tea. You didn't know what was happening? No. If Ryan had arrived, I would have wished you both congratulations. There wasn't even a trace of bitterness in his voice. Just truth. The next morning, I drove to Ryan's apartment. My spare key still worked. I assumed nobody was home, until I saw women's shoes beside the entrance. Not mine. The bedroom door opened. Lena stepped into the hallway wearing an oversized blue Oxford shirt. I recognized it immediately. I'd bought that shirt for Ryan's birthday 6 months earlier. He always said it was his favorite. Lena froze. Oh, Naomi. I can explain. Before I answered, Ryan appeared behind her. His expression collapsed the instant he saw me. Naomi, please. This isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. It looked exactly like something. Whether that something was true hardly mattered anymore. I'm here for my belongings. I rolled my suitcase inside. Ryan hurried after me. Lena's grandmother got worse last night. She became sick. I brought Lena back because she couldn't drive. She got sick too. She borrowed my shirt. She slept in the guest room. Nothing happened. The explanation arrived far too quickly. Almost rehearsed. Lena lowered her head. I'm so sorry. I didn't know the shirt was yours. She reached toward the buttons. I'll change. Ryan stopped her immediately. No, you don't have to. Then he turned toward me. What did you expect her to wear? Interesting. That was his first instinct. Protecting her comfort, not acknowledging mine. Suddenly, everything became very simple. The late-night calls, emergency meetings, canceled vacations, missed anniversaries, hospital visits, client dinners. Whenever Lena needed something, Ryan appeared. Whenever I felt hurt, he asked why I couldn't be more understanding. It had never been one dramatic betrayal, just thousands of tiny choices, always made in the same direction. I packed quietly. Books, laptop, documents, photographs. Ryan followed me from room to room, talking constantly, trying to explain, trying to persuade, trying to rewrite yesterday before it hardened into history. Finally, he stopped me near the front door. You don't love Julian. Hope filled his face. You married him because you were angry. I adjusted my suitcase handle. I never said I loved him. Relief flooded his expression. Then I finished speaking. But yesterday, I realized I don't love you anymore either. He stared at me, as though those words had never occurred to him as possible. Before leaving, I placed one envelope on the hallway table. My resignation from Foster Dynamics. Effective immediately, attached. A notice from my own software company, the forecasting platform, I'd licensed to Ryan's startup. 7 years earlier would expire, exactly as scheduled in 3 months. No early termination, no punishment, simply no renewal. Ryan's hands shook. You can't do this. I already have. You'll destroy everything. No, I'm ending a contract. You always knew it had an expiration date. He looked at me desperately. You're mixing business with personal feelings. I shook my head. No. For the first time, I'm separating them. I walked away. This time, he didn't follow. For the first time in 7 years, Ryan didn't try to stop me. He simply stood inside the apartment holding the resignation letter, watching me disappear. 3 days later, Seattle woke up to headlines. Not about our canceled wedding, about business. Foster Dynamics delays Series B investment following executive leadership changes. The article barely mentioned me. Just one sentence. Chief Strategy Officer Naomi Carter has resigned. I smiled when I read it. For years, that was exactly how my work had been described. One sentence. After hundreds of hours, I founded Harbor Analytics 2 years before Ryan launched Foster Dynamics. It was small. Only 26 employees. We specialized in predictive logistics software. When Ryan couldn't afford enterprise licensing, I licensed our platform to his startup for almost nothing. Later, when investors praised Foster Dynamics' forecasting engine, Ryan accepted the compliments. I never corrected anyone. I thought one day we would share the same last name. Recognition could wait. Apparently, it had waited long enough. Julian never asked about Ryan. Not once. Instead, one evening while we reviewed contracts together, he asked, "What do you want Harbor Analytics to become?" I blinked. No one's asked me that in years. I'm asking now. I stared at the city lights outside his office window. I want people to know our software, not because it's connected to someone else's company, because it actually deserves to exist. He smiled slightly. That's a much better reason. The following Monday, Ryan called. 32 missed calls. I answered the 33rd. Not because I missed him, because avoiding conversations doesn't end them. Naomi, his voice sounded exhausted. Please, just listen. I am. The investors are panicking. They think you're leaving because the software won't be renewed. They're right. It expires. I know. So renew it. I remained quiet. He continued. 1 year. That's all. We'll pay market price. Interesting. Not, I miss you. Not, I'm sorry. The conversation found business remarkably quickly. Why? I asked. Silence. Then, you know the system better than anyone. No. I asked. Why should I renew it? Another pause. Longer this time. Finally, I thought you'd help me. Because 7 years, there it was. The invisible contract. Love meant permanent access, permanent forgiveness, permanent extensions. I'm following the agreement we both signed, I said calmly. The license expires. You knew that. Naomi, don't do this. I already have. I ended the call. Then instructed legal counsel that all future communication should arrive through attorneys. That evening, Julian found me still working after 8. He placed dinner beside my laptop. You skipped lunch. I forgot. No, you postponed. He corrected gently. Those are different. I smiled. You notice everything. He looked almost embarrassed. I try. 1 week later, our first disagreement arrived. Real marriages eventually reach them, even unexpected ones. I left Harbor Analytics after dark. Ryan waited outside the building. Not aggressive, not shouting, simply standing beside the entrance. When he saw me, he walked forward. I just need 5 minutes. Before I could answer, security stepped between us. Sir, we've been instructed not to allow contact. Ryan frowned. What? I turned sharply. Instructed by who? A familiar voice answered behind me. I did. Julian. Ryan laughed bitterly. So now you decide who she's allowed to speak with? He walked away before either of us answered. Rain swallowed him almost immediately. I looked back at Julian. You told security to stop him? Yes. You didn't ask me. I know what you thought. My voice stayed calm. But protecting me isn't the same thing as deciding for me. He froze. Completely. Several seconds passed. Finally, he nodded once. You're right. No defense. No explanation. No. I was only trying to help. Nothing. He removed his phone. Called the head of security immediately. I'm canceling yesterday's instruction. Pause. Future access decisions belong to Ms. Carter. Another pause. Yes. Effective now. He ended the call. Then faced me again. I'm sorry. I crossed a line. I won't do it again. I stared at him, waiting for justification. None came. Only accountability. On the drive home, neither of us spoke much. Finally, I broke the silence. That was surprisingly easy. What? Admitting you were wrong. Julian kept his eyes on the road. It wasn't easy. It was necessary. I leaned back quietly. Ryan always argued intentions. Julian accepted consequences. The difference was surprisingly large. Business moved quickly after that. Harbor Analytics announced its first independent enterprise platform. 3 major clients signed within 2 weeks. None came through Julian. None came through my family. Every contract stood on its own. Exactly how I wanted it. When reporters asked whether Mercer Capital planned to finance Harbor Analytics, Julian answered publicly, "We're participating in the same competitive process as everyone else. No preferential treatment. If her company can't win fairly, it shouldn't win." Some journalists called the answer cold. I didn't. I called it respect. One Sunday afternoon, my father invited me into his study. A thick folder rested on his desk. He pushed it toward me. I think it's time. Inside lay every adoption document my parents had ever signed. Court orders, medical reports, letters, photographs. One page stopped me completely. My adoption certificate, issued 20 years earlier. Under relationship, only one word appeared. Daughter. Nothing else. Not foster child. Not adopted daughter. Simply daughter. I always thought. I struggled to finish. You brought me home because I reminded you of Emily. My mother's eyes filled instantly. Our first conversation happened because of Emily. She admitted softly. Our second, our third, our 100th, those belonged entirely to Naomi. Dad cleared his throat. We loved you. We were simply terrified. Terrified we'd love you so loudly, you'd think replacing someone was your responsibility. So, we stepped back. I laughed through unexpected tears. You stepped back so far. I thought you didn't want me close. We know, Mom whispered. And if we could change one thing, that would be it. Driving back to Julian's house, I realized something. Almost every important relationship in my life had been damaged by silence, people trying to protect each other without actually saying what they felt. When I arrived, Julian sat on the back patio reading. He looked up. Everything okay? I walked over slowly, then asked, Did you already know? About what? My parents. He nodded. I suspected. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't my story. I smiled. Of course, that sounded exactly like him. Autumn settled over Seattle quietly. The rain became colder, the mornings darker. Life, surprisingly, became peaceful, not exciting, not dramatic, simply steady for someone who had spent 7 years adjusting herself around another person's. Emergencies. Steady felt almost luxurious. Julian never asked where I was every hour, never questioned why I worked late, never complained when I chose Harbor Analytics over dinner. Instead, every afternoon around 6, a single message appeared. Working late? Sometimes I answered yes, sometimes no. His reply never changed. Drive safely, or I'll be outside whenever you're ready. No guilt, no pressure, just an option. One Friday evening, our legal team finalized Harbor Analytics' largest contract to date. A nationwide shipping company, 3 years, worth more than every agreement we'd signed combined. The office erupted in applause. Champagne appeared. Someone turned on music. For the first time, nobody congratulated me because of Ryan, or my family, or Julian. They congratulated me because I'd built something worth celebrating. When I arrived home after 9, Julian had already eaten. He looked up from the dining table. Congratulations. You knew? It was in today's industry newsletter. He stood, walked toward the kitchen. I made soup. It's probably cold now. I can heat it. I laughed. You read industry newsletters? I read anything with your company's name on it. He answered so naturally. I almost missed what he'd said. Later that night, while washing dishes together, I noticed something. He knew exactly where every mug belonged, exactly how I folded kitchen towels, exactly which cabinet held my favorite tea. Not because I'd told him, because he'd quietly paid attention. The realization stayed with me. A week later, heavy rain flooded parts of Interstate 5. My flight home from San Francisco landed almost 3 hours late. When I exited baggage claim, Julian waited near the entrance, umbrella in one hand, coffee in the other. You didn't have to come. I know. He smiled. I wanted to. Such a simple sentence. No dramatic speech. No attempt to impress me. Just honesty. Halfway home, traffic stopped completely. Rain hammered against the windshield. Neither of us minded. I've been meaning to ask you something, I said quietly. He glanced toward me. Go ahead. Why did you really agree to marry me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he parked beside the waterfront overlook, turned off the engine, then looked at me. Because you asked. I smiled. That's not the whole truth. No, it isn't. For a long moment, he simply watched the rain. Finally, he spoke. I've loved you for a long time. My heartbeat slowed strangely. How long? He looked almost embarrassed. I stopped counting. I waited. He continued. When you were 19, you brought homemade cookies to my grandfather after his surgery. You stayed exactly 12 minutes because you had an exam. He talked about your visit for weeks. I think that's when it began. 19? I whispered. Julian, that was over 10 years ago. I know. You never said anything. You loved someone else. His answer came without hesitation. My feelings didn't give me ownership over your choices. The words settled quietly between us. No bitterness. No regret. Only acceptance. I watched you build a life. He continued softly. I watched you choose Ryan. I disagreed. But it wasn't my place. So I stayed away. I stared through the rain-covered windshield, trying to understand. You waited 10 years. I lived my life. I worked. I traveled. I dated. I simply, he smiled faintly, never met anyone who felt like home. I couldn't think of anything to say. That weekend, a pipe burst inside Julian's study. The house manager asked me to help move several storage boxes before repairs began. Most contained financial records, old photographs, books. Then, a small cedar box slipped from the top shelf. The lid opened. Inside lay a carefully folded paper crane, faded almost white with age. I picked it up slowly. Recognition struck instantly. I made this years earlier. During a charity fundraiser, I'd folded paper cranes with children. At the end of the event, I'd handed one absent-mindedly to Julian. I didn't even remember doing it. Apparently, he had. Beneath it rested something else. An old bookmark. A dried maple leaf laminated between clear plastic. A handwritten thank you card. Every tiny thing. I'd forgotten giving him. At the very bottom, a rolled blueprint. I unfolded it carefully. An architectural drawing. Dated 3 years earlier. Long before our marriage, one room had been circled in pencil. Beside it, Julian had written one note. Large reading window, warm lighting, mystery novels, white orchids. Every detail matched a conversation we'd had years ago during Thanksgiving dinner. I'd once joked about my dream reading room. He'd remembered every word. The room where I now slept had been designed long before I ever entered his house. Not as Naomi's room, simply a guest room, one he quietly hoped I might someday enjoy. Without ever assuming I would, when Julian returned that evening, the blueprint waited on the dining table. He stopped walking. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, "How long?" He understood immediately. 10 years. You built that room 3 years ago? Yes. You hoped I'd come someday? I hoped. He corrected gently. I never expected. I looked at him carefully. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Because you were happy. I wasn't. You believed you were, he answered. And that mattered. For the first time, his love frightened me, not because it felt overwhelming, because it felt real. Steady, patient. It asked for nothing, which somehow made it feel larger than anything I'd known before. Julian seemed to notice my silence. Without another word, he walked into his office, returned carrying one folder, placed it gently in front of me. Inside lay signed divorce papers, already completed, already notarized. Only my signature remained missing. Our agreement, he said quietly. 1 year. If knowing how I feel makes you uncomfortable, you can leave tomorrow. The house stays yours until you're ready. No arguments. No guilt. No negotiations. I looked at him. You prepared these? Before tonight? Yes. I hoped I'd never need them. But hope shouldn't become pressure. He stepped backward, giving me space, exactly as he always had. I love you, he said. And because I love you, I refuse to become another reason you feel trapped. He turned, walked quietly upstairs, leaving me alone with the papers, the blueprint, and the paper crane I'd folded, for a man who had quietly carried it through 10 years of his life. I didn't sign the divorce papers, not that night, not the next morning. Instead, I placed them inside my desk drawer at Harbor Analytics, not because I couldn't decide, because I wanted my decision to come from peace, not fear. The following 2 weeks became the busiest of my career. Harbor Analytics officially launched our new enterprise platform. The response exceeded every forecast. 3 logistics companies signed contracts before the end of the month. 2 international firms requested demonstrations. For the first time, people recognized Harbor Analytics as an independent industry leader. Not the company connected to Ryan Foster. Simply Harbor Analytics. Julian kept his promise. He never asked about the divorce papers. Never hinted. Never waited outside my office. Never tried to remind me what he'd done for me. He treated me exactly the same. Professional. Warm. Respectful. The absence of pressure somehow made me think about him even more. One rainy Thursday evening, I left the office after nearly 10. The parking space where Julian usually waited was empty. For several seconds, I simply stood there, then smiled to myself. I didn't miss being picked up. I missed him. I unlocked my car, stopped, then took out my phone. Are the divorce papers still valid? His reply arrived less than a minute later. Always. I stared at the screen, then typed again. What about our marriage? This time, nearly 10 minutes passed. Finally, his answer appeared. As long as you want it. Yes. I drove straight to his house. The lights were still on. When Julian opened the door, he looked surprised. Then his eyes dropped to the envelope in my hands. You came for the papers? Yes. He stepped aside. Without asking another question, inside the living room, I removed the envelope, took out the signed divorce documents, looked at them one last time, then slowly tore them in half. Another tear, then another. The pieces slipped quietly into the fireplace. Julian didn't move. He simply watched me, as though afraid that even speaking might influence my choice. I looked directly at him. I don't know if I'll ever love you the way you've loved me. His expression didn't change. But I know how I feel when I'm with you. I don't have to compete for your attention. I don't have to prove my worth. I don't have to become smaller, so someone else can feel bigger. My voice shook slightly. I didn't come back because you waited. I came back because somewhere along the way, you became the person I wanted to tell everything to. Silence filled the room. Then Julian asked only one question. Are you sure this isn't gratitude? I walked toward him, For the first time since we'd married, I wrapped my arms around him first. He didn't touch me. Not yet. Only after I nodded did he carefully hold me, as though I were still completely free to step away. "I missed you," I whispered. His eyes closed briefly. So did I. 6 months later, Northbridge's problems finally reached their conclusion. The board completed its internal investigation. Ryan resigned as chief executive. Not because of me, because repeated governance failures had cost the company the confidence of its investors. Several independent audits confirmed what everyone had quietly ignored for years. Too many decisions had been based on personal loyalty. Instead of professional judgment, Ryan sent me one final email, not asking for another chance, not asking for another meeting, simply an apology. For the first time, it contained no excuses. One sentence remained with me. "I thought you would always understand because you always had." I closed the message, then archived it forever. Some apologies deserve acceptance. They do not always deserve a second beginning. A year passed. Quietly, peacefully, Harbor Analytics expanded into Canada. Our employee count doubled. Julian and I learned how to disagree without hurting one another. Sometimes I worked too much. Sometimes he became overly protective. When either of us crossed a line, we apologized, then changed. Love, I discovered, wasn't built by never making mistakes. It was built by refusing to let pride become more important than the person standing beside you. Exactly 1 year after our courthouse marriage, Julian placed our original 1-year agreement on the dining table. "The term ends today." He smiled gently. "You can choose again." I pretended to think. "Continue. Or leave." "Yes," he answered. "As always, your choice." Instead of answering, I handed him another envelope. He opened it, looked inside, then stared at me. It wasn't another legal agreement. It was a reservation, a small chapel overlooking the Olympic Mountains. Not the courthouse. Not the venue Ryan and I had once considered. Somewhere entirely ours. "I don't want to repeat someone else's wedding," I said quietly. "I want one that belongs to us." For several seconds, Julian couldn't speak. Then, he laughed. A genuine laugh, the kind I'd almost never heard from him. I've imagined hearing those words for years. Snow fell lightly the morning we married again. This time, with family, friends, music, laughter. No cameras for investors, no business headlines, no dramatic speeches. Just people who loved us. My father walked beside me down the aisle. Halfway there, he stopped, took my hand, and smiled. "When your mother and I adopted you, we never hoped you'd become someone else. We hoped you'd always know where home was." My eyes filled with tears. "I know now." He kissed my forehead. "Good." Julian waited quietly at the altar. When I reached him, he didn't rush, didn't pull me closer. He simply asked softly, "Nervous?" "A little." "We can slow down." I smiled. "No. This time, I'm exactly where I want to be." Years later, a journalist interviewed me after Harbor. Analytics became one of the fastest-growing logistics software companies in North America. Near the end, she asked, "What was the greatest turning point of your life?" I thought about the question carefully, then answered honestly. It wasn't getting married. It wasn't building my company. It wasn't even falling in love. It was the afternoon I finally realized someone else's failure to choose me was never proof that I wasn't worth choosing. When the interview ended, Julian waited outside the building, exactly where he'd said he would. He smiled. "Finished?" "Yes." "Dinner?" "I'd love that." He held out his hand, not to lead me, not to pull me, simply to walk beside me. I took it. Together, we walked toward the car, matching each other's pace. Neither one ahead, neither one behind. Exactly where love had always been meant to begin.